What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions for the launch version of Diablo 4, which is entering its early access period of roughly 5 days before its official launch on the 6th. And while I have covered the betas and everything that have been happening over the past couple months, I wanted to actually talk a little bit about this as I move to completely review the title and sort of set the stage for how that's going to work, etc. However, I want to kick this video off by mentioning that a couple of weeks ago, I was offered a sponsorship for covering Diablo 4 that I ultimately wound up turning down. However, while I turned that down, I requested a review copy instead, which they turned down. Now, I tell you that simply because a lot of the restrictions around both the review dates as well as how they wanted that sponsorship handled were very strange. Some of the terms were trying to tell me how I could respond to comments on my own videos, or things like not allowing me to talk about other ARPGs for like a week or so, among some other just rather bizarre requirements, which is why I ultimately turned it down. But even had they provided me a review copy, I likely wouldn't have been too happy with that either, as talking to some other content creators as well as just what some of them posted themselves, there were also just really weird requirements around the reviews, like only being able to use a set amount of footage before a certain date, which is all to tell you there was just a bunch of weird arbitrary rules around this one, and ultimately I felt a lot better just buying this game for myself, including the edition that gave me the early access so I could cover it without all these weird rules, which is what we're going to do now. Now I want to kick this video off by talking about the monetization and what that looks like, simply because it was one of the key things I was curious about what the implementation was when I fired it up on the launch. And as it stands right now, it's a pretty, I would say, standard microtransaction setup where you can buy a varying amount of currency to then spend on their in-game shop. Their in-game shop is completely cosmetic, at least as it stands. No utility items or anything like that, simply cosmetic outfits or skins for your horse that you'll eventually get, and that is it. But what I was also happy to see is that at least here in the early access period right now, nothing pushes you towards the shop. In fact, what you're seeing on screen here is what I went looking for. At no point during playing or getting to roughly level 30 before I stopped to make this video was I ever prompted to open a shop. There was no talk about it. It's simply a tab at the top of one of the menus, and if you're actively looking at your wardrobe, there is an open shop option near the bottom, and that's pretty much it. And I tell you that to tell you that while I really don't like this being here, frankly, as it stands, the cosmetics are a very tame implementation. But we have yet to see exactly what that looks like when we start talking about the battle passes that we know are coming for the upcoming seasons, which again are only supposed to be cosmetic. But at least for right now, it looks like they are handling that in an unobtrusive way, though that has been known to change after the fact, so we shall see if they hold their word on that one. From there, first impressions wise, I can honestly say that this was probably the smoothest launch of a Blizzard game I have ever been involved in, and I used to play WoW a lot. Blizzard isn't exactly known for their smooth online launches, but this one was genuinely very smooth, no problems at all. There was a wait time of about 4 minutes when I first logged in, and that was it. Now, I did see some PlayStation users having some problems in particular, but that was about the only report of issues I could really come across, and otherwise I didn't have any server issues, no lag, no inconsistencies. Even the rubber banding that was present throughout all the betas seems to have passed me by this time. But with all of those pressing things out of the way, let's actually talk a little bit about the game itself. In terms of the mechanical state of the game, it is largely in the same place it was as the server slam from just a week or two ago. However, even here, I did notice some small changes, or at least what felt like small changes. For instance, the druid, which is going to be my main character, felt a lot more smooth to play, though that might have been down to some lucky drops on my end, as I did find a couple of legitimate legendary drops outside of just using an aspect to craft one. Now, story-wise, as I'm sure everyone is aware, we will be tracking down Lilith after she made her dramatic return to Sanctuary, following the events of the previous games. Since her arrival, she has been driving people mad, stirring up problems, but doing so under the guise of supposedly trying to protect everyone. And while that's standard information, what I do want to say for an impressions video is I'm very curious where they're going with this story. I'm very interested in Diablo. It's a franchise that I love, that I have played extensively, and now that we can finally get outside of the Fractured Peaks and see what's going on elsewhere, I will say that the story is presented in such a manner that I am very eager to learn more about what the plot here is, where they're going, when Inarius is inevitably going to show up, etc. So I think they've got a lot going for them there. Progression-wise, nothing much has changed, but we have actually seen some things open up now. For instance, the Druid will be able to go get their spirit boons, which were previously unavailable because the zone you have to go to do that in wasn't available during the betas. So with this being the full launch, we will get actual access to things like our individual class mechanics, because each class will have a unique mechanic outside of just their abilities that makes them feel more interesting. And that, combined with some of the mechanics like eventually getting to ride a horse around and just being able to explore Sanctuary at large, all the different areas of it, is definitely what I'm looking forward to the most. And while I won't bore you with all the details of the gameplay that we're already well aware of thanks to the prior betas, I will say that as I move to review this title, what I'm going to be keeping an eye on is a lot of the systems that weren't available, such as the Paragon system, the more in-game oriented systems, the capstone dungeons, the 2 world tiers we didn't have access to, etc. And just seeing how those things feel to play, on top of if they add anything dynamic to the experience outside of the multiplayer, so to speak. Because as far as first impressions go, Diablo 4 leaves you with a pretty solid one. The early experience, as you might imagine, has a pretty high level of polish. The combat feels very weighty. Even the things I was concerned about aren't really that big of a deal, like running into people out in the open doesn't really happen too often. And someone like myself who just prefers to play single player, I don't really need to engage with anyone. Most of the systems seem to be emphasizing that you can play on your own. They're not sort of pushing MMO mechanics, at least as it stands, even though there are those elements present. But towards the beginning here, as I move to review this title, it's looking a bit more positive than I was initially thinking it was with the very strange review situation. But after seeing the launch version of the way some of these things are handled, I'm optimistic. However, at the same time, I do think that the price of this game being what it is, that having these microtransactions as well as the upcoming battle passes is frankly really annoying, but as long as they keep it purely cosmetic, it's not going to bother me that much. Most of what I'm going to keep my eye on as I move to review this is purely how a lot of those in-game systems work and what the rest of the world looks like. And speaking of the actual review, it's going to be a little bit different than my regular work, because where I usually review games after 100% doesn't really apply to a game like this where it is online. We know there will be seasonal content coming that might change the very nature of it. So in my opinion, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to do a review after 100% for this. So it will likely just be a regular review, in which I'm going to try to play several classes to the end game, examine those systems, and basically just get to a point where I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing and I feel like I've done most everything. And while the content of that review probably won't change much, where I'll go over basically all of the systems at play, how everything works, even the things I've already covered previously, etc. It will still be a little bit different from my usual stuff, so I wanted to mention that here. But that said, that is pretty much all I've got for you guys today. If you're looking forward to the review, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, stick around. I should have it up sometime next week. I doubt it will take me that terribly long. But in the meantime, by all means, let me know down below how you feel about the title, if you're checking out the early access period yourself, etc. Things you'd like to know for the review, potentially, anything like that. But regardless of all that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.